Wings of War. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // The sky was still dark, but hints of light were breaking at the edge of the horizon. The sea hissed softly against the black stone of the docks, ships creaking with supplies, sails furled, ready to unleash their might upon the stormlands. Torches lit the walkways, flickering gold against the chill morning mist. Daenerys Targaryen stood tall in her silver and black cloak, the House Targaryen sigil clasped at her shoulder. Her eyes scanned the line of unsullied boarding the galleys with practiced precision, their discipline immaculate even in silence. You will land at Storm's End, she said to Grey Worm, her voice calm but firm. Secure the surrounding lands. Rally the small folk to our cause. Show them what true loyalty looks like. Grey Worm bowed his head, his dark gaze steady and unwavering. I will not fail you, my queen. She looked at him for a moment longer. I know. Across the docks, Aeron Grim stood with his black cloak billowing slightly in the breeze, arms crossed as he stared at the shadow-forged knights silently marching toward their own vessel. Their armor whispered with otherworldly weight, blades of midnight glinting faintly under torchlight. Next to him, Fang, his massive shadowcat, stalked silently, its glowing eyes alert and fixed on the sea. Another 2 shadowcats prowled around the knights like hunting hounds born of smoke. Aeron turned to Raya, who was adjusting the strap of her scabbard, her jaw set. Don't worry, he said, his voice carrying a quiet strength. With my 100 knights awaiting for you in Storm's End, and Fang here. He nodded toward the beast pacing beside her. You won't have any trouble securing the Stormlands, and even beyond. Raya didn't look at him at first. Her fingers lingered on the hilt of her sword, then slowly her gaze lifted to meet his. I'm not worried about anything, she said. But then, she paused. Her voice dropped a little, just for him. I only care about you. Aeron's brows furrowed slightly, but his face softened. With how much you've grown, she continued, eyes flickering with a rare vulnerability, with the power you carry now, it's like the world is watching you. And I don't know why, but I feel like something bad is going to happen. I can't explain it. Aeron stepped closer, the wind curled around him, tugging at the darkness that clung to his frame like a second skin. He smiled gently just for her. I told you once before, nothing in this world can harm me. Raya looked up at him, and despite herself, smiled. You did. She reached over her shoulder, adjusting the worn, weather-beaten sword strapped to her back, the blade she'd carried since the north. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and marched up the ramp of the ship, her boots echoing against the wood. She spotted Grey Worm overseeing his men and called out, loud enough for all to hear. Come on, Grey Worm, we've got a kingdom to conquer for our monarch. Grey Worm gave a subtle nod and followed without question. Aeron watched them go, shadow and steel sailing into the mists. Beside him, Daenerys stepped into view, her arms crossed as she too watched the ships drift from the docks, sails unfurling like wings. She said nothing. Neither did he. Only the sea spoke between them. War was coming, and the first move had been made. The sound of waves breaking against the shore filled the silence as Aeron and Daenerys stood side by side, watching the ships carrying Raya, Grey Worm, the Unsullied, and the Shadow soldiers disappear into the morning mist. The sky had begun to burn faint orange on the horizon, the world caught between night and dawn. Boots clicked against the stone behind them. A beautiful send-off, came Tyrion's voice, dry as ever. Though if I were on that ship, I'd be drinking heavily and pretending not to notice the army of cockless men and nightmares aboard. Varys joined him with that slow, deliberate stride of his hands folded within his sleeves. It seems the game is no longer played by lords and ladies, rather beasts and ghosts. Aeron didn't turn. Time for us as well, he said quietly, eyes still fixed on the sea. To sail. Quote. Daenerys glanced at him, her silver gold hair catching the first kiss of sunlight. Very well. She stepped forward, lifting her head. A commanding breath filled her lungs, and then. Drogon. The name tore through the air like a whip crack. From the sky above, he answered. With a shriek that split the air, Drogon descended like a thunderstorm, his wings flattening the mist below as his massive frame crashed down onto the black stone beside her. Flames smoldered in his throat, smoke curling from his maw as he let out a roar that shook the very sea. Tyrion instinctively took a step back. No matter how many times I see it, I could never get used to all of this. Dany placed a hand on Drogon's snout, calming him with the barest whisper. She turned to Aeron, her violet eyes narrowing with curiosity. Where is the cannibal? Aeron grinned. His eyes glowed, faint yet unmistakable, an eerie light like moonfire burning behind Shadow. With me. Suddenly, the shadows at his feet twisted, stretching unnaturally across the stone as though alive. The darkness widened, rippled, and then something began to emerge. A scaled head rose from the inky pit, eyes glowing like twin suns. The head alone dwarfed Drogon, its teeth jagged. Then came the wings, massive, bursting from the shadow-like sails in a storm. With a deafening roar, the cannibal shot into the sky, black as night, darker than Drogon, more primal. The wind howled around his ascent, and then he turned in a sharp arc and landed beside Aeron, wings folding, body coiling like a serpent waiting to strike. The ground trembled. Even Drogon snarled low, eyeing the other dragon warily. Varys took a careful half-step behind Tyrion. I suppose now would be the time for a prayer. Tyrion just stared, blinking slowly. And I thought your shadow soldiers were unsettling. He looked to Daenerys. Can you please make sure he doesn't burn the kingdoms? Aeron only smirked. Daenerys didn't answer immediately. She stepped toward the cannibal, who lowered his head slowly, almost respectfully. Then she turned back to Aeron. We ride. Aeron nodded, eyes locked on the horizon. We ride. The two mounted their beasts. Drogon, fierce and regal, wings half spread in the morning light, and the cannibal, ancient, brutal, a beast born of shadow and hunger. Upon their backs, Daenerys Targaryen, the unburnt, and Aeron Grim, the Shadow Monarch. Before they could take off, Aeron turned his head slightly, wind brushing his hair as the cannibal shifted beneath him. Tyrion, he called down, voice cutting clean through the salt-kissed air. Before we leave, any suggestion? Where should we go first? The Vale, the Riverlands, or the Reach? Tyrion, squinting up against the sun and the two massive beasts above, stroked his beard thoughtfully. Tactically, he said, the Reach is the breadbasket of Westeros. Seize it, and the rest starves. But, the Vale, they're proud, isolated, and too comfortable behind their mountains. A display of power there might shake the rest into sense. Still, if you want chaos, fear, and to test how loud your dragons can roar. He gestured lazily. The Riverlands. They're already broken. Smash what remains, and the tremors will be felt all the way in Castle Rock. Aeron considered this, eyes glowing with an inner gleam. He smirked. All right then. He turned to Daenerys, his voice low but firm. To the Riverlands. She nodded once, without a word. Then both dragons roared, wings expanding with titanic force, dust and pebbles blown out in a storm of power. In one synchronized beat of wings, Cannibal and Drogon surged into the sky, leaving the earth behind in a gust of shadow and flame. Below, on the docks, Tyrion watched them rise, two small silhouettes riding on the backs of living nightmares. He sighed, shaking his head. You know, he muttered to Varys, when I was little, I dreamed of seeing dragons. He paused, then added dryly, I mean, I'm still little. But now I rather wish I hadn't. Varys, unblinking, murmured. Dreams have a habit of turning into nightmares, my friend. And above them, the dragons screamed. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 6 comments 0 vote. Harrenhal. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Above Westeros, high in the clouds, 2 dragons soared like twin harbingers of doom. Drogon, black as a starless night and fire incarnate, glided with wings that darkened the sun. Riding him like a goddess was Daenerys Stormborn, her silver hair caught in the rushing wind, her eyes fixed ahead with fire and purpose. Beside her, the cannibal, a massive shadow dragon, bigger, older, wilder, more monstrous than any other dragon, tore through the sky like a living storm, his maw curled in permanent hunger. On his back sat Aeron Grim, his cloak billowing like shadows come to life, one hand clutching the cannibal's shadow reins, the other busy with something far less ordinary. Before his eyes, floating like ethereal light only he could see, was his user interface. Aeron Grim. Job. Necromancer. Title. Kingslayer +5 strength, +5 agility, +5 sense. All-knowing, instantly understand new concepts, +50% learning speed, automatically identify items, creatures, and magic. Level. 52 right pointing arrow 70. Fatigue. 0. HP. 6250. MP. 5400. Strength. 120 right pointing arrow 138 +5. Health. 96 right pointing arrow 129. Agility. 90 right pointing arrow 128 +5. Intelligence. 100 right pointing arrow 118. Sense. 77 right pointing arrow 110 plus 5. Available ability points. 54 right pointing arrow 0. Passive skill. Tenacity, level 1. Skills. Ruler's authority. Perception plus 10 to sense when analyzing or strategizing. Bloodlust, new. Mutilation. Chains of the Abyss. Job-specific skills. Shadow extraction, level 1. Shadow exchange, level 1. Monarch's domain. Question mark question mark question mark. Unawakened skill. Inventory. Dracorizor. Direfang sword. Silverfangs. Abyss Drake armor set. Mask of the Forgotten Faces. Ashen scales. The Cannibal's crown. Shadow army. 556 600ths. The Cannibal. No 1. Vadris of Ashai. 10 sorcerers of Ashai. 10 wyverns. 100 shieldmen. 50 brutes. 90 archers. 200 knights. 70 Dothraki riders. 10 assassins. 1 giant. Garm the direwolf. 4 wolves. Fang and 4 shadowcats. 2 ice bears. Aeron hovered a finger over the interface, watching the numbers shift, his power solidify, and the feeling of raw potential surge through his veins. This is good enough, he muttered to himself, dismissing the glowing screen with a blink. From beside him, Drogon drew closer, and Daenerys leaned forward on her saddle, calling out over the rushing wind. Talking to yourself again, Aeron? She asked, smirking. What's wrong? Is the mighty King of Shadows frightened of what he might find in the Riverlands? Her voice held a teasing lilt, but her eyes never left him, sharp, curious, and quietly watchful. Aeron turned slightly, just enough to meet her gaze. The cannibal let out a low rumble beneath him, as if echoing his amusement. Monarch of Shadows, he corrected with a faint smile, the glow in his eyes briefly flaring. Daenerys raised an eyebrow, amused. Of course. My mistake. Aeron looked ahead, toward the vast stretch of land far below, green, broken, smoldering with old scars and new battles. His expression hardened, though his voice remained calm. No, I'm not afraid, he said quietly, almost to himself. I'm just mentally preparing. The Riverlands have seen too many banners and too much blood. I don't expect a welcome. Only resistance. Daenerys tilted her head slightly, her tone softening despite the wind. I'm all for peace, but we will do what's necessary. He chuckled. That's what I like to hear. Then the cannibal slowed down just enough for Drogon to keep up and surged ahead with a beat of wings, Drogon matching the motion. They streaked across the sky like two comets of ruin, shadows and flame. Asterisk. Harrenhal. Harrenhal loomed before them like a cursed crown of blackened steel, twisted by fire and frozen in time. Aeron sat atop the cannibal, cloaked in cold shadows and the howl of wind. Beside him, Drogon glided through the sky with that familiar, silent fury Daenerys mounted with regal poise, her silver hair streaming behind her like a war banner. As the massive towers of Harrenhal came into full view, Aeron leaned slightly forward, his gaze sharp locked onto it. Smoke still curled from some of the shattered battlements' residual signs of life. Of occupation. Look, he said, voice low but cutting through the roar of wind like steel. You need to see this. Dany, hearing the shift in his tone, pulled Drogon to a slow hover beside him. She turned her gaze toward the cracked courtyards and half-melted towers and her eyes narrowed. I can't see from this distance. Aeron. There, Aeron said. Among the stone wreckage and the desolation of a ruin that refused to die, fluttered crimson banners embroidered with a golden lion. Lannister banners. Her jaw tightened. That's impossible, she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. Tywin pledged peace. The Lannisters signed the treaty. They should have left the Riverlands, when they stopped the war. Aeron didn't even look at her. His eyes remained locked on the keep below. Tywin Lannister doesn't believe in peace. He believes in opportunity, Aeron said flatly. Even now, after all that's happened after Eddard Stark's death, after his grandson and all who died mysteriously by my hand, he still moves pieces behind closed doors, thinking that he can control the kingdoms. Harrenhal wasn't meant to hold any force. Not anymore. And yet. He gestured downward with a gloved hand, his shadow extending along the wind like a reaching tendril. There they are. A small force. Quiet. Hidden behind the ruins. Not enough to wage war, just enough to hold ground. Enough to say, this is still ours. Daenerys's eyes burned like molten gold, her hands tightening on Drogon's reins. He plays a dangerous game, she said. Holding land in secret. Aeron gave a cold, humorless smile. That's Tywin. A lion with a dagger under his paw. I'm keeping him alive because I want him in my service, but. The cannibal let out a deep, throaty growl, sensing its rider's tension. What will you do? Dany asked. Aeron finally turned to look at her, his expression unreadable, his voice laced with quiet resolve. Send a message. The Riverlands are not his to hold. Not anymore. Far below, the lion banners flapped in defiance. Asterisk. Down in the courtyard, a handful of Lannister soldiers no more than 100 lounged about in the shadow of Harren's melted towers. Campfires crackled, tankards clinked. Their red and gold cloaks fluttered in the wind like arrogant whispers. I'm telling you, said one soldier, a younger knight with a lion pin crooked on his breastplate, this place is cursed. I saw a shadow move through the walls last night. Looked like a man. Tall, cloaked in smoke. Laughter erupted around the fire. Aye, and next you'll say you heard the ghost of Harren himself whispering in your ear, another chortled, throwing back a swig of ale. Or maybe the Targaryens forgot one of their dragons buried under the keep. Or maybe, drawled a grizzled sergeant, it's the Shadow King. The one the peasants whisper about. He snorted. Dead men don't walk, and they sure as hell don't roam around in abandoned castles. They all laughed again. Arrogant, relaxed, unbothered. Then the wind shifted, and the sky split open. From the heavens came a shriek that wasn't natural. Not beast, not man, something in between. A sound forged in death. The cannibal fell from the clouds like a living nightmare, its wings spread wide like a cloak of darkness. Scales glinting with ash and shadow, teeth like swords, eyes like molten pits of hate. The massive dragon's descent was thunder itself, tearing wind from the sky, a force of nature that obliterated laughter in an instant. Seven hells, what is that? Someone screamed. Dragon. Another shouted, stumbling back. But it wasn't just a dragon, it was a myth, except it existed now. He landed like a hammer from the gods, slamming into the earth with such force the very ground cracked and a crater exploded beneath him, sending soldiers flying, tents collapsing, the fire pits extinguished in a wave of dust and force. Horses reared and screamed, shields clattered, bowels loosened. And before they could even blink, Drogon descended next. Graceful but no less terrifying, wings flaring wide in dominance. He landed beside his shadow-scaled kin, fire still crackling between his jaws. From the cannibal's back, Aeron Grim dismounted. Cloaked in obsidian armor, glowing eyes burning. Each step he took was followed by a pulse of unnatural silence. Even the dragons waited. He stopped before the trembling crowd of Lannisters, all of them too terrified to draw their swords, too frozen to run. Who is the commander here? Aeron asked, his voice cold, echoing with unnatural weight. None answered. Until one, a proud young Lannister officer gathered what little courage he had, straightened his back, and stepped forward, jaw clenched. Aeron's glowing eyes locked onto him. Approach. The command was not loud, but it dragged through the air like a blade across stone. The officer took a single step forward, and then another. Sweat glistened down his face. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. 4 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. FrenzyAren. Download app now. Hope is not a strategy. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Aeron stood unmoving, the loose folds of his cloak billowing in the foul wind. With a thought, Dricker materialized into his hand, erupting into being from smoke and crackling black fire. The dark greatsword seemed less a weapon and more an extension of his very will, a blade of judgment. The gathered soldiers flinched backward instinctively, steel boots scraping against broken stone. Even the most hardened among them gripped their swords tighter, panic flickering in their eyes. The young commander, the one who had dared step forward, stood his ground, though sweat trickled down his brow. His hand twitched toward his sword, but he did not draw it. Not yet. Aeron lowered Drickerizor's blade slightly, its fire hissing against the damp courtyard stones. Why are you here? Aeron asked, voice low and cutting. The young commander swallowed, confusion flashing briefly across his face before he stiffened. I have been ordered to keep Harrenhal under our control, he said, voice steadier than expected, though the crack of fear was buried beneath the surface. Aeron's burning gaze swept over the half-ruined castle, the remnants of Lannister banners hanging limply from scorched battlements, the trembling ranks of soldiers awaiting their fate. Yes, Aeron said, his voice almost amused, almost contemptuous. I'm not blind. He took a slow step forward, Drickerizor dragging faint black fire in its wake. I asked you why. The commander hesitated, silent, his lips pressed into a grim line. Loyalty shone in his eyes, even now, even in the shadow of death itself. Daenerys, mounted atop Drogon, narrowed her violet eyes, observing carefully. She leaned forward slightly, curious, surprised, perhaps by the young knight's boldness. It was rare, she knew, to find such devotion these days, even among the lions of the rock. Aeron tilted his head, almost admiring. Impressive, he said, voice laced with dark approval. Still loyal. He turned, pacing slowly past the commander. His voice, when it came again, was cold and knowing. I'll answer for you. Aeron dragged his gaze across the broken castle walls. Tywin Lannister, old snake, ever the schemer. He holds Harrenhal to keep his claws in the Riverlands, to keep his reach ready should another war ignite. He knows this peace is but mist over boiling waters. The realm stands on the brink of chaos, and he prepares as only Tywin does, with quiet steel and veiled treachery. He turned, blade still aflame, facing the commander squarely. But what he does not understand, Aeron said, voice deepening to a near growl, is how insignificant he is in the grand scheme of things. The earth seemed to tremble as the cannibal shifted behind him, growling low and guttural, smoke curling from his fanged mouth. Drogon snarled softly in response, the two dragons like waiting hounds at Aeron's side. I will allow you to withdraw, Aeron said, his words heavy as a sentence. The Riverlands are not yours to conquer. Return to the Westerlands. Or to King's Landing, it is up to you to decide. The courtyard held its breath. The young commander trembling slightly now, fists clenched tight at his side stared at Aeron for a long, hard moment. Duty warred with terror, loyalty with common sense. Finally, he spoke. I can't do that, my lord. His voice cracked, but he did not falter. Aeron's glowing eyes narrowed to burning slits. Behind him, the cannibal let out a low, dangerous rumble, black smoke pouring from its nostrils, claws tearing deep into the stone. Daenerys shifted slightly on Drogon's back, her face unreadable, though a flicker of something pity, or perhaps admiration crossed her features. She knew this man had just signed his death warrant. You are brave, Aeron said softly. But that was foolish. The fire along Dracarizor's edge roared higher. Foolishness in this world is a terrible thing. Aeron turned from the cowering soldiers and faced the monstrous shadow that was the cannibal. The ancient dragon shifted, smoke coiling from his gaping jaws, awaiting his master's command. Aeron, feeling the raw power from the dragon. His violet eyes gleamed, and he said almost conversationally. You understand Valyrian, don't you? The cannibal let out a deep, resonant growl, not mindless rage, but acknowledgement. Aeron's mouth curled into a dangerous smile. His gaze sharpened, voice dropping into an ancient tongue, thrumming with command. Dracarys. The courtyard didn't even have time to scream. The cannibal spread his wings, wide wings that could have blotted out the sky, and drew in a tremendous breath. Then he unleashed it. A torrent of black fire, dark as smoke and ash, poured from his maw with a horrifying roar. It wasn't like Drogon's flame, it was thicker, heavier, almost alive as it devoured everything it touched. Stone melted like wax. Steel ran like rivers. Men became shadows and then ash in an instant. The young Lannister commander, defiant until the end, vanished in a storm of shrieking flame. Their banners, the proud lions of House Lannister, turned to cinders, spinning away into the smoky skies. The courtyard of Harrenhal, already a ruin, sank further into desolation. Towers cracked and split, collapsing into themselves. The ancient black stones groaned and wept fire one again. And still the cannibal roared, a sound of such primal fury that it made the bones of the land itself tremble. Above it all, Aeron stood unmoved, Dracarizor burning at his side, watching the judgment unfold with cold, sovereign eyes. Daenerys, atop Drogon, watched in awe and shock. The power unleashed, the ruthless finality of it was staggering. But in her heart, the queen understood. Sometimes a king must deliver judgment. And sometimes, judgment must come on wings of fire. When at last the flames died down, and only the smoldering ruins of Harrenhal remained, Daenerys guided Drogon down beside Aeron. The heat from the charred earth warped the air around them. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent as she spoke. It's like history repeating itself, she said, gazing at the blackened skeleton of the castle. First it was Balerion who burned Harrenhal when its lord refused to bend the knee. She turned to Aeron, eyes fierce and knowing. And now you. Aeron said nothing at first. He simply stared out over the ruins, the smoke rising. Then, with a small, grim smile, he spoke. No, it's not about history, people just never learn. Asterisk. King's Landing, the Red Keep. The Red Keep's throne room was heavy with tension. King Tommen Baratheon, still young and uncertain, sat small and fragile upon the iron throne, a boy draped in a crown too heavy for his head. Beside him, seated on the chair of the hand, Lord Tywin Lannister loomed like a living statue, unmoving, every flick of his cold eyes measuring the room. Below them stood Petyr Baelish, always smiling that sly, secretive smile. And at the queen's side Cersei, proud and burning with barely concealed rage. The court was otherwise empty save for the echoes of their private conversation. Dragons, Tommen said at last, his voice soft, fearful. How can we fight such things? Aeron Grim rides a monster even larger than the queen's. Cersei shifted at his side, her knuckles white where they gripped the armrest. You don't, she snapped, sharp enough to cut. You kill the rider. Tywin gave her a measured glance, silencing her with the weight of his authority before he addressed the boy king. Wars are not won by brute strength alone, Tywin said calmly, nor by fear. They are won with patience. With strategy. Daenerys Targaryen has dragons. Aeron Grim has magic. But they are still mortal. Baelish stepped forward then, his voice light, almost amused. There is a thought, my lords, he said smoothly, one worth considering. Dragons may be terrifying, but even the greatest beast is nothing without its master. And sorcery, he chuckled low, sorcery will die with its wielder. Tywin's eyes flickered toward him. Baelish smiled wider and leaned closer, dropping his voice to a whisper meant only for the Lion of Castle Rock. Invite him, Littlefinger whispered. Offer peace. A parley, perhaps. A chance to speak terms. Once he is here, inside these walls, he let the implication hang in the air, like a blade over a neck. We remove him quietly. Cut out the rot before it spreads. Tywin considered him for a long moment, face unreadable. At length, he rose slowly to his feet, towering over Baelish. You will handle this, Tywin said, his voice cold iron. Extend the invitation. Speak the right words. Bait the trap. He smoothed his crimson cloak over his shoulders with finality. I am returning to Castle Rock. I have wasted enough time here. I have matters to attend to. Cersei frowned, clearly wanting to object, but Tywin silenced her with a look sharper than any blade. Baelish bowed low, the very picture of obedience. Of course, my lord. I will see to it personally. Tommen shifted uncomfortably on his throne, staring at the grown men plotting as if they were discussing supper. Is there any hope for us to beat them? He asked hesitantly. Tywin gave him a thin smile, if it could even be called that. Hope is not a strategy, your grace. It is a weakness. With that, he turned and strode from the hall, leaving Cersei glaring after him, and Littlefinger already scheming in the shadow of the Iron Throne. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 10 comments 0 vote. Beneath the Lake. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Above the cursed, crumbling ruins of Harrenhal, 2 titanic shadows wheeled through the heavy skies. The cannibal black as the void itself beat his monstrous wings with slow, thunderous strokes, while Drogon soared beside him, crimson and black fire made flesh. Aeron sat firm atop the cannibal's broad back, his violet eyes scanning the lands below, his cloak snapping in the roaring winds. Daenerys rode Drogon with the easy grace of a born dragon rider, her silver hair streaming behind her like a banner. Below them, there was nothing. No banners flapping, no armies marching. Just the battered remains of a dead castle and the endless mist rolling in from the God's Eye and the Isle of Faces. It's strange, Daenerys called over the howl of the wind, her voice wary. There is nothing here, no villages stirring. No men at arms gathering. Not even broken men or thieves. Only those poor fools you burned at Harrenhal. Aeron's mouth twisted into a small, grim smile. Harrenhal is cursed, she said again, softer this time. They say the stone itself screams at night. That it remembers the fire that melted it. The cannibal rumbled deep in his chest, a low growl vibrating beneath Aeron's legs. Drogon hissed in response, uneasy. Aeron's voice cut through the wind, calm and cold. Tywin Lannister doesn't believe in curses, or magic for that matter. He glanced down at the blackened ruin below. Which is why he sent men here to die. He only believes in power. And he needs to be reminded there are forces beyond his grasp. Daenerys flew closer, Drogon's huge wings stirring the mist into ghostly shapes. She narrowed her eyes as they circled over the Isle of Faces, the island rising in the center of the lake, shrouded in ancient trees and fog. Why are we circling the Isle of Faces? She asked, suspicion growing in her voice. Aeron didn't immediately answer. His gaze was fixed ahead, his hand tightening around Dracarys's hilt on his back. Finally, he spoke, his tone quiet, but burdened. I told you, fly to Riverrun ahead of me. I have something I need to find here. There was something in his voice, not fear exactly, but a deep, simmering unease. Daenerys frowned, feeling Drogon's agitation under her. Care to tell me why? She pressed, steering Drogon closer to his side. Aeron turned slightly toward her, his glowing violet eyes catching the dim sunlight like twin shards of amethyst. Just go, he said simply, a command, but not a harsh one. But Daenerys Stormborn was not so easily ordered around. Her mouth set in a stubborn line. Do you think I am weak? The cannibal snarled again, sensing his rider's tension. Below them, the waters of the god's eye shivered as if something vast stirred beneath the lake's surface. Aeron exhaled slowly, voice almost pained. No, Daenerys, you are not weak. He looked down at the lake, at the island thick with ancient magic, and his voice dropped lower. But this isn't something you can fight. For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Only the sound of the wings cutting the mist and the distant cry of some lonely bird. Daenerys studied him for a long moment. She saw the seriousness, the burden, and rarest of all a flicker of worry in Aeron's usually cold, unshakable demeanor. Finally, she gave a small nod, guiding Drogon downward toward a safe landing at the water's edge. As she descended, Aeron remained hovering above the mist, his cloak billowing. Then, a sharp chime rang through his mind. Apostle detected nearby. His eyes snapped wide, and the cannibal reared back midair, wings thundering. The waters of the god's eye rippled violently. Dark shapes moved beneath the surface, huge and ancient, as if something old and forgotten was awakening. The cannibal growled, deep and thunderous, his hackles raised. His black wings spread wide, shielding Aeron like a dark god of death. Aeron stood in the stirrups, his hand materializing Dracarizor in a swirl of black flame. Daenerys, half turned from where she had just dismounted Drogon, watched in stunned awe as Aeron's shadow loomed over the mist, his greatsword burning with an eerie fire. Whatever had been sleeping beneath the Isle of Faces, it was coming out now. And the waters of the god's eye exploded. A geyser of black, roiling water shot into the sky, and from it rose a nightmare. A beast born from Sala's worst legends. The kraken was enormous, its slimy black tentacles thick as ancient oaks, writhing and slapping the surface with waves that could drown armies. Its massive body, scaled and armored like a fortress, heaved above the lake, its many eyes glistening like wet onyx, soulless and hungry. Jagged teeth, each as long as a man's sword, gnashed the air as it bellowed a soundless roar, the cry of something ancient and profane. Daenerys stumbled back, wide-eyed, instinctively drawing closer to Drogon, who growled deep in his throat, wings flexing wide and ready for battle. What is that thing? She screamed towards Aeron. Aeron didn't answer her at first. His gaze was locked on the creature, and more precisely on the figure standing atop it. A man clad in black scaled armor, crowned with a twisted driftwood crown. His eye patch gleamed, and his one good eye burned with madness. Salt crusted his beard, and in one hand, he held a wicked-looking axe carved with strange, writhing symbols. Euron Greyjoy. Aeron's expression darkened. His hand tightened around Dracarizor, the burning greatsword flaring brighter in his grasp. You're the apostle, Aeron called out across the misty waters, his voice a blade of steel. Euron threw his head back and laughed, a sound wild and cruel that echoed over the lake. The kraken beneath him thrashed the waters again, sending sheets of spray and waves toward the Isle of Faces. Apostle, Euron sneered. No, little shadow. I am the chosen. The drowned god speaks through me. And today, he wants your head on a pike. He leaned forward, one foot braced on the kraken's slimy hide, and pointed his axe at Aeron. Ready to die, cunt of shadows. At that moment, a familiar chime sounded sharply in Aeron's mind. Apostle Quest. Defeat Euron Greyjoy, apostle of the drowned god. Aeron's violet eyes narrowed dangerously. Without looking at Daenerys, he spoke, his voice high and commanding. Stay back, Dany. As far as you can. Daenerys hesitated, torn, but the seriousness in Aeron's voice, something almost protective, made her nod grimly. She pulled Drogon and rose higher into the mist, giving Aeron the space he needed. The cannibal sensed his rider's fury. The great black dragon snapped its jaws and bellowed a deafening roar, wings flaring like massive sails. Aeron stood high in his stirrups, Dracarizor blazing in his hand, his black cloak streaming behind him like a banner of war. He leaned forward slightly, his voice cutting through the storm like a dagger. Dracarys. The cannibal answered without hesitation. The beast reared back its massive head, throat glowing deep with molten black fire, and then unleashed it all at once. A river of black flame, thicker and more violent than anything Drogon can ever hope to breathe, erupted from the cannibal's maw, racing across the misty sky in a tidal wave of destruction. The kraken shrieked a horrid, gurgling bellow as the fire slammed into it, sizzling and hissing as water turned instantly to steam. Its thick tentacles flailed madly, some igniting under the unnatural fire. Euron, impossibly, stood firm, raising his axe and roaring in defiance even as the world burned around him. Daenerys, watching from above with wide eyes, felt a chill run through her even through the heat. She had seen fire, Targaryen fire, destroy armies. But what Aeron Grim unleashed now was not mere fire. It was judgment, once again, and it slammed into the Kraken with the force of a cataclysm. For a moment, the monster seemed like it disappeared entirely beneath the roaring inferno, the surface of the god's eye thrashing and churning like a sea boiling alive. Even Drogon growled with a note of caution in his voice, a rare thing from a dragon who feared little. Aeron sat atop the cannibal, his blade still burning in his hand, his violet eyes hard and focused. He exhaled slowly. It should have been enough. And yet, from the blackened waters, something moved. The lake hissed and frothed violently, and then Aeron saw it to his disbelief. The water kraken began to regenerate. Scorched tentacles grew back grotesquely, the beast's armor like hide knitting itself together with sickening speed. Chunks of its body that had been blasted away by the cannibal's fire simply reformed from the surrounding water, as if the god's eye itself fed its regeneration. Euron stood atop the beast, laughing a cruel, mocking sound that carried over the steaming lake. Aeron's eyes widened slightly, he muttered under his breath, his voice almost amused despite the danger, "Not that easy, huh?" The cannibal beneath him shifted restlessly, growling deep, sensing the unnatural power binding the creature together. Aeron smiled darkly, the thrill of battle awakening in his blood once more. He called out toward Euron, voice cold as the grave, "At least you're stronger than the last one." // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 9 comments 0 vote. Apostle of the Drowned God. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Aeron clicked his tongue, standing atop Cannibal's neck with his greatsword Dracarizor in his hand in a blaze of dark flame. "Let's see what your god has made of you, can you take this again?" Dracarys. He bellowed. The cannibal opened his vast maw and spewed a torrent of black fire. It wasn't ordinary dragon flame, it was suffocating, the surface of the lake boiled instantly, steam rising in shrieking columns. Trees on the nearby shore were reduced to ash. But as the fire cleared, the kraken remained once more. Aeron's eyes narrowed. The beast's wounds were gone. Water had surged up from the lake, regenerating flesh and bone as though mocking the concept of death. Again, he muttered, "I must kill Euron first." The kraken struck. A massive tentacle lashed up, forcing Cannibal to twist and wheel through the air. Aeron held tight, gripping the spikes on Cannibal's back as a second tentacle surged toward them. Cannibal bit down on it midair and tore it free, but the moment it splashed into the lake, it melted and reformed. Euron laughed like a mad prophet. "You can't kill what belongs to the sea." Aeron leapt from Cannibal's back, falling like a meteor toward the kraken. He brought Dracarizor down with both hands, carving through the air with a trail of black flame, but before the blade struck, a wall of water surged upward like a hand and swatted him aside. He slammed into the surface of the lake, skipping once, twice, before summoning his ruler's authority mid-flight to stop himself. Admirable strength, Aeron roared, extending his hand toward Euron. Invisible force exploded out, enough to uproot trees, enough to bend stone. But Euron didn't move. The apostle just stood there, his feet planted firmly on the regenerating beast as if rooted to its very being. "I answer to no king of shadows," Euron sneered. "Only the drowned god. And he is coming." The kraken rose again, its full mass revealed now hundreds of feet wide, the size of a castle, and its maw opened in a wail that sounded like an entire fleet sinking. Cannibal shrieked in dove. Aeron still hovering with ruler's authority on top of the water, and then landed back on the black dragon's neck after he lowered himself to his monarch. Aeron pointed his blade forward. "We go again." They crashed through mist and sea spray, Aeron swinging Dracarizor wide. A tentacle lashed toward them. Aeron hacked through it mid-flight, shadow flames gouting from the wound, but the lake healed at the moment it touched water. The kraken's head loomed, jaws opening. "Now!" Aeron screamed. Cannibal barrel rolled over the kraken, then flipped, wings snapping wide to break midair. Aeron jumped again, this time, using his superior speed to blink forward onto the beast itself, shadows rippling under his feet as he landed just feet from Euron. Euron lunged with his sword. Clash! Dracarizor and the sea-forged sword met. Black fire and ocean fury exploded from the point of impact, knocking both men back. From a distant hill overlooking the god's eye, Daenerys Stormborn sat astride Drogon, the great black beast tense beneath her, wings flexing in restless agitation. Wind howled around them, carrying the clash of titans across the water like a song of war. She had seen her dragons burn cities. She had seen shadows walk among the living. Yet this was a whole new experience to witness. Aeron fought like a dark god, hair whipping violently in the stormwinds, his great sword alight with cursed black flame. He raised one hand, and with a shout that cracked the very clouds, enough games. A force unseen surged from his palm. Ruler's authority. Euron Greyjoy, clad in armor atop his monstrous kraken, stiff and pinned, his limbs frozen mid-motion as if the very world had turned against him. The apostle's mouth opened, twisted in shock as he struggled. Daenerys leaned forward, her heart pounding. He has him. He has him. Aeron descended like judgment, Dracarys raised high in one hand, its dark flame roaring to finish it. But the waters answered. A translucent dome of seawater surged up around Euron, a prison of the drowned god, swirling violently, sealing him within. The blade met not flesh, but water and divine resistance. Simultaneously, a massive tentacle snaked up from below, whipping Aeron midair, and hurled him like a broken spear across the lake. Cannibal shrieked, shadow black wings flaring, diving after his master in a frenzy. The kraken roared louder than any dragon. Its cry churned the waters, waves crashing violently against the shoreline. Tentacles rose and fell like battering rams. The lake boiled and frothed, and from far away from the battle, Drogon growled. Daenerys could feel it Drogon's rage, his need to join the battle. But she placed a calming hand on his neck. No. She watched as Aeron caught himself midair, hovering with one knee bent, one hand outstretched, black mist swirling around him. He twisted in the air, black fire flickering from his shoulders like a cloak, his eyes burning violet unbroken. Unbent. The kraken swatted at Cannibal, but the ancient shadow dragon answered with fire that turned lake to steam only for the beast to regenerate again from the very water it thrashed in. The battle raged. I knew he wasn't just a man, Daenerys whispered, her voice breathless, her heart thundering in her chest. Her silver hair danced in the wind. But this was not war. This was a myth being written in front of her very eyes. This looks like a fairy tale, a ghost story, she whispered. Something older, darker. She looked to Drogon. Her dragon growled low, eyes watching the battle with almost primal reverence, as if he too understood that the cannibal was not simply one of his kin but a part of something greater. A shadow made horror. Daenerys placed a calming hand once more on his snot. You were born to burn cities, Drogon, she said softly. But that one, he was born to fight gods. Through Dany's eyes, Aeron attacked again relentless, darting through crashing tentacles and walls of surging water, trying to reach Euron once more. Each time, the kraken threw more at him. Each time, Aeron carved through it with black fire and fury. Asterisk. Air stank of salt and smoke. Aeron hovered high above the raging waters of the god's eye. Steam curled upward from where dragonfire had kissed the lake, only to vanish against the constant renewal of water and endless cycle of healing. And still, the kraken lived. Its grotesque mass swirled in the depths, tentacles slamming against the surface like thunderclaps. At its heart sat Euron Greyjoy, a twisted silhouette of a man, seated atop the beast's crown like a mad prophet atop an altar of chaos. Aeron clicked his tongue. This is getting bothersome. He said it with a sigh not of fear, but of rising irritation. His violet eyes scanned the lake, measuring every movement, every regeneration. The cannibal rumbled beneath him, a beast forged in darkness and hunger, but even his hellfire had not been enough to finish it. I can tell that he's still weaker than me, Aeron muttered, eyes narrowing. But this defense, this stubborn water bastard, how am I supposed to kill something that refuses to die? Cannibal let out a thunderous growl, wings flexing midair, black flame curling from its throat like breath from a furnace. Below, Euron raised his arms theatrically, laughing like a lunatic possessed by a god. What is dead may never die. Euron screamed, this is the greatest threat. Euron shouted mockingly, a boy with a big lizard and a sword of smoke. Pathetic. Aeron barely flinched. His eyes sharpened. Vaporizing the lake is not possible, he said to himself, tone analytical, calm under pressure. Even with Cannibal's endless firepower, it would take too long. He paused, then smirked faintly. The solution, as always, wasn't brute force. I just need to get close enough. His eyes glowed. Assign a shadow to Euron. Exchange and kill him faster than the kraken can shield him. Aeron leaned low, pressing his body against the cannibal's obsidian-scaled neck. We dive for one final time. The cannibal roared, a horrible sound like the cracking of mountains, and folded its wings for speed. The air warped around them as they descended a spear of black flame and wrath hurtling toward a monster. Below them, Euron spread his arms and howled with laughter, the kraken raising a dozen tentacles to meet them. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 8 comments 0 vote. Apostle of the Drowned God 2. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // The sky split. A scream tore through the clouds, the cannibals roar while diving, louder than thunder, darker than night. Wings folded like a vulture in descent, the monstrous black dragon became a living comet of hatred, hunger, and fire, hurtling straight toward the writhing mass of tentacles below. Aeron stood tall upon the beast's back, coat whipping violently around him, eyes blazing a terrible violet as wind tore past. Black fire licked the seams of his greatsword, Dracarizor, now sheathed on his back as if even it knew this moment demanded nothing but a single quick move. And then, boom, impact. The cannibal dove like a comet of midnight flame, crashing into the kraken with a deafening boom that sent shockwaves through the lake, rippling the waters for miles. The sheer force of the collision shattered the mirrored surface of the god's eye, exploding into steam and hissing mist. The cannibal roared a primordial, thunderous bellow and sank his claws into the water-like body of the kraken. But there was no flesh to tear, no bones to break. His claws passed through churning, coherent water, dense as steel and yet liquid like a storm surge. His jaws snapped shut around the kraken's head, a semi-formed maw glowing with abyssal energy. No blood, just water, pressurized and ancient. When the cannibal tore, he did not draw blood, he ripped currents apart. Entire sections of the kraken detonated into vapor, the water losing cohesion under the raw power of shadow and fire. But even as the dragon roared in triumph, the water reformed, slithering back with unnatural speed. Tentacles. Dozens. They surged up, wrapping around the cannibal's legs, wings, neck, constricting him like a sea god's punishment. The more he burned, the more water the kraken drew from the endless depths of the waters around God's eye. One tentacle wrapped around his throat, tightening, thickening with pure hydraulic pressure. Another latched to his wing, trying to drag him under. Still, the cannibal resisted fury incarnate. His chest swelled. And he unleashed hell once more. Black fire burst out, an infernal inferno that didn't just scorch the surface, it vaporized chunks of the kraken on contact. Water hissed and screamed, evaporating instantly, forming steam that blanketed the battlefield like a curtain of smoke from hell itself. But the kraken was elemental. It reformed, always. For every limb the cannibal burned away, 3 more returned, now slick with divine resilience granted by the drowned god himself. From the dragon's back, Aeron leapt. A blur, a shadow, a streak of black. He crashed down on the kraken's massive body, right beside Euron Greyjoy, landing so hard it dented the armored water flesh beneath them. Euron's grin flickered just for a second. Too late. Got you, Aeron muttered. His hand moved faster than sight, a shadow, silent as death, slipping it into Euron's body with a dark whisper. The apostle of the drowned god twitched, eyes widening, sensing something slithering beneath his feet. And then it happened. The water rose violently like a beast itself. A prison of water surged around Aeron, swirling with unholy force. The tentacles of the kraken coiled, grabbing him like the wrath of the ocean incarnate. The water solidified around him, and in one cruel instant, he was hurled away. Gah! Aeron slammed through the air, body tumbling, his bones ringing from the force of it. A crater's worth of water followed him as he plummeted toward the lake. But just before impact, Aeron grinned. Too late for you now. His violet eyes gleamed, and he whispered. Exchange. Reality blinked. In an instant, Aeron's form blurred, vanished and reappeared behind Euron. The swap complete. The apostle's eyes widened in shock as he felt a hand already inside his chest. Aeron's fist had punched straight through his torso, erupting from his back in a spray of corrupted blood and steam. Wah! How? Euron stammered, a gurgle of disbelief on his lips as he dropped to his knees. His hand reached up to grab Aeron's arm, trembling, failing. Eyes full of madness, now full of fear. Aeron leaned down, close. The kraken thrashed beneath them. The cannibal roared right next to it. Shadow and flame twisted in the wind around the 2 men, one born of death, the other of drowned forgotten god. Aeron's voice was quiet, absolute. Just lay down and die. And then Euron spat blood, whispered hoarsely. Fuck, you. Aeron twisted his arm slowly. Euron's body slumped, folding over itself as the kraken beneath him began to tremble. He collapsed across its pulsing water mass, like a broken marionette, his limbs hanging limp, his lips parted in a final mocking grin that now meant nothing. And then, the water broke. Like a dam bursting in slow motion, the titanic mass of the kraken began to fall apart. Its shape no longer held, its edges unraveling like threads coming loose, tentacles collapsed into waves. Its massive form, once terrifying and vast, started melting back into the lake, no longer glowing, no longer alive. It was as if the water itself sighed and forgot that it had ever been a monster. The surface of the god's eye calmed, rippling gently as the wind passed. Aeron stood atop what remained, boots slipping as the watery foundation dissolved beneath him. TCH, he grunted, shifting his weight. Above, the skies parted slightly through the mist, the cannibal swooped low. The black dragon stretched out a mighty wing, the edge of it slicing wind like a blade. Aeron ran 2 steps then leapt. He landed smoothly on the wing, grabbing a ridged spine as the cannibal beat his wings once and ascended skyward, shaking the last of the mist from his scales. Aeron turned back, looking at the spot where the kraken had once loomed like a god. Shit, he muttered under his breath, the frustration quiet but real. I didn't even get to extract the bastard's shadow. The violet in his eyes dimmed slightly as he straightened up. It matters not, he added. The kraken was the problem, not him. The cannibal soared upward, its massive wings beating with thunderous force, trailing black smoke and fire. Aeron crouched low between the creature's jagged obsidian spines, narrowed his violet eyes as he spotted her Daenerys hovering above the trees on Drogon, still as a statue. He raised one hand and pointed. Take me to her, he commanded. The cannibal growled in reply, then tilted midair, banking hard toward Drogon. Daenerys hadn't moved, not an inch. She landed and just sat there, her silver hair whipping around her face, staring down at the lake where in her eyes a god had died. Her hands trembled on Drogon, though she wasn't aware of it. Her dragon rumbled, but even Drogon seemed subdued, no longer the wild beast of fire and fury, but a living creature sensing that he is no longer the apex predator. She didn't even notice the massive shadow approaching from her left. The cannibal landed beside her with a sound like thunder, the ground itself trembling as his weight sank into it. Charred earth cracked beneath clawed feet. His wings folded like the gates of doom closing shut. Aeron leapt from his mount with casual grace, his black cloak trailing behind him like smoke. He approached Daenerys slowly. His first words shattered her daze. Are you all right? He asked. She blinked. Am I all right? She repeated, almost laughing. Her voice cracked, fragile from what she'd witnessed. She looked down at him, the question echoing in her chest like a bell. I'm the one who's supposed to ask you that. A beat passed. Then another. No, she whispered finally. I guess I'm not. She dismounted, her boots hitting the blackened ground softly. Her eyes never left his, searching them. Not with fear, but with awe. I just saw something, she said slowly, voice shaking, that would normally make people go mad. Aeron tilted his head, a small, tired smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Well, you've seen my powers already. This shouldn't surprise you. Daenerys shook her head. No, she said. This is different. His expression grew curious. How so? She stepped closer, as if needing to know to understand what she had just witnessed. For starters, she said, eyes narrowing faintly as the images still flashed in her mind. Who was that? Or what was that? Aeron's smile faded then. The air grew heavy again as his gaze turned toward the center of the god's eye, where the lake had finally calmed. // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 6 comments 0 vote. Kiss of Flame and Shadow. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Their eyes met his glowing violet and hers, equally violet but full of awe. The world slowed for a heartbeat as they stared into each other's fire-forged souls. His gaze wasn't just light, it was depthless, like peering into an ancient storm made of stars. That, Aeron said, taking her hand gently, exists because I exist. She tensed. What do you mean? I wield power far beyond what this world was meant to contain, he said. So the gods of this world or whatever rules it, they marked me as an enemy, a corruption, a threat to their balance. In their eyes, I should not be. Before she could respond, the cannibal let out a grunt behind them. From his maw, something tumbled, a dripping, half-charred head. It rolled to Aeron's feet with a wet thud. Aeron knelt, picked it up without hesitation, and flung it to the ground beside Daenerys. Bits of flesh clung to the bone. The face was unrecognizable, contorted, burned, and yet, human. That, he said grimly, was an apostle. The gods cannot fight me directly. So they give power fragments of their will to mortals, hoping they'll kill me in their stead. That was the one I killed in Bravos. Daenerys recoiled, unable to look away. You killed that in Bravos? He nodded. Was the last edition before my fight here. 4 more to go. She stood quiet, the weight of the revelation settling over her like snow on a burned field. These apostles, they're after you. Not the realm, not the throne. No, Aeron said, throwing the head back to the cannibal like it was nothing more than trash. The power isn't truly theirs. And I doubt they're free to do as they please. They serve a greater will and I'm the target. Daenerys exhaled. I never thought I'd see such things here in Westeros, and here I thought the birth of my dragons were a miracle. Aeron chuckled dryly. Fear not. My worst battles were in Essos. He gestured toward the cannibal with one finger. Daenerys followed his gaze. He was one of them? She asked, eyes wide with disbelief. Indeed, Aeron said, not with pride, but with quiet gravity. He was an apostle once. Before I killed him. There was an alive dragon? She asked, almost breathless. Other than my own, I thought this was one of your abilities, something you conjured with shadow magic. Aeron didn't answer right away. He looked out over the waters of the god's eye, now calm and still, as if the kraken's thrashing had never disturbed its surface. No, he said at last, turning back to her. He was real, flesh and scale, fire and fury. The last and greatest of the old dragons, before I found him. His voice held no triumph, only that same quiet gravity, a heaviness worn by one who walk a path that no one dares to. Daenerys stepped closer, her voice hushed now. And what did you do to him? Aeron looked into her eyes. Violet to violet, truth to truth. I ended him. Her lips parted, but no words came. A storm of questions brewed behind her gaze. Aeron continued, don't feel sorry for it. That dragon ate other dragons to survive. That's why he was called the cannibal. You already know about the dance, so I don't have to mention your family's lore. As for how he is here after I killed him, I guess I never truly explained to you what I can actually do. You've seen the Shadow's soldiers, but not how I make them mine. Her brow furrowed. I see. So these apostles. They don't always appear as men. Correct, Aeron said. And not all are made of flesh. There is one in the far north, not a man. And he commands the dead. The people in the north are aware of this threat, which is why they were easy to convince. Daenerys felt her blood chill at his tone. Is he the strongest? She asked. Aeron looked northward, his eyes narrowing. I assume so. The wind picked up again. Drogon let out a low, guttural rumble, sensing the weight of what had been said. Daenerys didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached out and placed a hand gently on Aeron's chest. She felt the heat beneath his armor. The storm of a man who had defied gods, and wasn't finished yet. Then we better be ready, she said softly. Aeron looked down at her, and for the first time in a long time, his eyes didn't burn but softened and locked with hers. Something gentler stirred beneath the surface, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. He repeated softly, like the word itself was foreign to him. Daenerys stood firm, arms crossed over her chest, her silver hair dancing on the wind. She looked at him with defiance and curiosity. Why do you look surprised? She asked, one brow rising, her voice both playful and resolute. Aeron breathed slowly, his gaze dropping for a heartbeat as if considering her question. Because even monsters, he murmured, his voice quieter now, even beasts and a being like me, they know to fear threats like this. They retreat. They brace for impact and war, or even hide and never show themselves again. I thought you might. She stepped forward and placed a finger gently against his lips, silencing him before he could finish. But I'm not just anyone, she whispered. I am Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen. Born of fire, raised by battle. I've faced death, betrayal, loss, and still I rise. I am the last dragon, and I do not fear shadows or gods. Her words weren't spoken to impress, they were simply truth, carved into her soul by fire and the hardships she went through. The wind quieted around them as if listening. Even Drogon stood still as if he too was interested. Aeron stared at her, eyes wide with reverence. Then slowly, his lips curved into a smirk that didn't belong to a king or a conqueror, but a man who'd finally found something solid to hold onto in a world that constantly tried to throw enemies at him. And this, he said, voice a low rumble, this is exactly why I had to find you in Essos. He stepped forward, slow and certain, and took her into his arms. Not like someone claiming a prize, but like a soldier stepping into warmth after endless winters. She came to him without resistance, her hand finding its place over his heart, feeling the heat that burned beneath his dark armor. Her voice was a whisper against his chest. That thing, the water beast and the man on its back, he was someone from around here, wasn't he? Aeron nodded slowly. A lowly Greyjoy, nothing more. She looked up into his eyes, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. So you had to fight them all, alone? His grip tightened around her. Not anymore. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The wind around them grew still, as if the world itself was waiting. Behind them, the cannibal loomed like a mountain of black wings and fire, while Drogon stood like a sentinel, his eyes locked on his mother, but even he was silent. Watching and understanding. Daenerys took a shaky breath. Her silver hair, tangled from wind and battle, whipped softly across her face. Her hand resting over Aeron's chestplate, where his heart beat slow, powerful, steady. Like a war drum. You really were never meant to belong to this world, are you? She said quietly. He gave a ghost of a smile. And yet, here I am. And here you are. She didn't answer. Her hand slid up, past the black armor scorched by battle, brushing his jawline, the stubble, the battle grime. He didn't flinch. His violet eyes bore into hers, seeing everything, fear, awe, fire, and something deeper that she felt. And she rose on her toes. Their lips met. It wasn't a soft kiss, not something fleeting or unsure. It was heat and breath and fate, forged in blood and shadows and fire. The kind of kiss that shook the realm. Her fingers tangled in the collar of his cloak, pulling him closer. He wrapped his arms around her like he was claiming something long denied to him, not possession, but belonging. When they finally pulled apart, their foreheads rested together, breath mingling. The silence was no longer cold, it was heavy with meaning. Daenerys whispered, "We'll finish this later, once we destroy our enemies, together." Aeron's eyes glowed faintly violet once more. "No, Daenerys," he said, brushing her cheek with a hand like iron and flame. "Our enemies are already destroyed. They just don't know it yet." // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL 11 comments 0 vote. Riverrun. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. // Riverlands, Riverrun. The dragons finally descended. The great gates of Riverrun stood open, but the garrison waited with tense spines and wary stares. Above the battlements, the banner of House Tully fluttered against a gray sky. Beneath it, 2 shadows grew larger until they took form: cannibal, ancient and dark, wings like torn midnight sails, and Drogon. The beasts landed with earth-shaking thuds on the stony field before the keep, black claws gouging grooves into the mud. The men at arms flinched, some outright staggered as the cannibal bared teeth the size of great swords. From Cannibal's back, Aeron Grim dismounted first, his long black cloak settling around his frame like coiled shadow. His armor gleamed with a dark luster. At his back hung the strange greatsword, faintly pulsing. Then came Daenerys, descending Drogon with a warrior queen's grace. Silver hair whipped by wind, her violet eyes scanning the gathered men. She wore no crown, yet all saw her as if she did the last dragon, reborn in fire and vengeance. A hush fell. The silence was not fear, it was recognition. They have heard the news of Harrenhal's fall and the fires at the God's Eye. They had heard, and now, they believed. The Lord of Riverrun, Sir Edmure Tully, stepped forward with slow, cautious dignity, flanked by knights and kin. His voice was even. "Lord Grim, Queen Daenerys, Riverrun welcomes you and bends no knee to the dead, only to the living who still protect the realm." Aeron gave a small, cool smile. "Then you are wiser than most. I see that Robb Stark has informed you already of what's going on beyond the wall." "He did," Edmure Tully responded with a nod. They walked together into the keep. As the procession moved through Riverrun's inner courtyard, the retainers and soldiers parted like reeds before a storm. Whispers bloomed behind closed helms and armored shoulders. 2 guards near the archway leaned in close. "Is that really him?" one muttered, eyes darting to Aeron's back. "The one who commands the dead and burned the Lannisters in Harrenhal." "7 hells," the other whispered. "They say his ghosts are invincible and show no mercy in battle." Another near the steps added lowly, and the Mad King's daughter beside him, "I thought we were done with the Targaryens." Then came the low chuckle from a young man standing near a cart. "Did you see the way that Black Beast stared at us? That's not a mount. That's a bloody omen." One guard, trying to act braver than he felt, muttered, "They say he doesn't sleep." "Don't be daft," his friend scoffed. "He looks like an ordinary man to me. Look over there, he's halfway across the courtyard. There's no way he can." Then Aeron stopped. He didn't turn. He simply slowed, head tilting ever so slightly. Then he smiled. Not cruel, not kind. Just enough to say. I heard you. The first guard blanched, color draining from his face. Shit. I think he heard me. The second swallowed hard. No way. He's pretty damn far. The third, the youngest among them, stared with wide eyes. You sure that's a normal man after coming in on a gigantic black beast? Just shut up, will ya? Asterisk. The Great Hall of Riverrun. The fire roared in the hearth, throwing long shadows over stone and steel. The scent of smoke and damp river air lingered in the ancient hall. Banners of House Tully hung proud above, but the atmosphere below them was fraught. At the high table, Lord Edmure Tully sat with rigid composure, flanked by Sir Brynden, Blackfish, Tully, armored and cold-eyed, and Lady Catelyn Stark, cloaked in grey and blue, her face lined by grief and time. Before them, seated like a king without a crown, was Aeron Grim, a presence more felt than seen, with Daenerys Targaryen to his right, silent, watchful, yet radiating quiet fire. Goblets were untouched. Bread, unbroken. Sir Brynden broke the silence first, voice low but edged. You've brought monsters to our gates, Lord Grim. And the people are terrified for it. Aeron didn't smile. He only looked at the man who had once defied kings. I expected you, for example, Sir Brynden Tully, to be against bending the knee to someone with no name, no house, no rightful claim to anything. Bryndon's jaw tightened. I'm not stupid. I've heard what you did. I saw what your shadows did not long ago, when Roose Bolton was torn apart like meat. Aeron's fingers tapped once on the table, then he leaned back and crossed his arms. Robb didn't leave any detail unspoken. At the name, Catelyn stirred. Her voice cut through the air like a chill wind. No, he didn't, she said, eyes hard as flint. But I still think it's a terrible mistake to bend the knee to you. No matter what my son believes. Daenerys turned her head, uncertain, glancing between the Tullys and Aeron. She looked almost out of place in the conversation, like a storm momentarily stilled. Aeron's gaze finally shifted to Catelyn. You, he said, pointing at her with a single finger, not rudely but with intent. No wonder I didn't see you in Winterfell. Your absence makes sense now. Catelyn's brows furrowed, but Aeron didn't let her speak. Just so you know, you would have died, had I not done what I did back then. Bolton, Frey, the others, you name it. All of it. His tone sharpened. You should be grateful, Lady Stark. Your children are alive and well because of my actions. I took pity on House Stark. Then, after a pause, his eyes slid to Edmure and Brynden. Can't say the same for certain others. The hall went still. The fire cracked. Catelyn's lips parted, but no words came. Not even a whisper. Aeron stood slowly, towering. And in any case, he added, voice smooth as smoke, the Lord Paramount of Winterfell and the Lord of Riverrun have made their decisions. He looked down at her, eyes faintly glowing again. Your opinion, Lady Stark, is not wanted. Aeron stood slowly, towering over the high table. If we are in agreement, he said, his voice smooth as smoke, then I see no reason to keep frightening you or the small folk with my presence here. I shall take my leave. The room shifted with the weight of his words. Some seemed relieved, others dared not show it. Edmure blinked, fumbling for composure. You're leaving, already? He asked, surprised. Aeron's gaze swept to him calm, unreadable, yet heavy as iron. Yes. Is there a problem? Edmure raised his hands slightly. No. No problem. I mean, that's great, of course. Only. He hesitated, floundering. There is something you might help with, he added, almost choking on the request. Before the silence grew too long, Sir Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, spoke, his voice as firm and steady as ever. West of here, he said, some of our keeps remain under Lannister control. It's been that way since the war paused. The red lions still fly above our riverlands. He looked Aeron in the eye without flinching. We want them back. Aeron's lips curled into the faintest trace of a smile, not warm, not mocking, just knowing. And in exchange for your unyielding loyalty, you want my help. That is right, Lord Grim, the Blackfish said, without hesitation. Aeron looked toward the fire, then back to Brynden. His answer came cool and sharp. Not an issue for me. I will see to it. He began to walk, the sound of his boots echoing over stone. Tell your people, he said over his shoulder, the lion's claws will be torn from your lands by nightfall. Well, unless they flee first. Suddenly the sound of hurried steps of an aged maester entered the hall. Robes rustling and breath short, the maester bowed low before Lord Edmure, holding a scroll sealed with a familiar, royal sigil. A raven, my lord. It arrived moments ago, from King's Landing. At the words King's Landing, the mood in the hall shifted, subtle, but palpable. Even Daenerys halted. Edmure took the scroll, brow furrowing as he recognized the hand of the king's seal pressed into the wax. Breaking it open, he read only a few lines before stopping cold. Wait, this isn't for me, Edmure said, looking up slowly, his voice laced with uncertainty. This is meant for you. Aeron halted mid-step, half turned toward the doors. He pivoted fully and returned to the table. For me, he asked quietly, though it was more a statement than a question. Edmure handed him the parchment without a word. Aeron took it in gloved fingers and peeled it open. As he read, the silence returned. The hall watched him like he was a blade being unsheathed. The flames snapped in the hearth, but no one spoke. Daenerys looked to him, her gaze searching. At last, Aeron let the scroll roll back up between his palms, his expression unchanged but his eyes flickered with that quiet, violet glow. It is from the hand of the king, he said, voice unreadable. And? Daenerys asked. Aeron nodded once. A request, they call it. But a command wrapped in politeness, they want me to go to King's Landing for peace talks. Quote, // If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. And, if you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at URL